Phenomena I'm interested in are these social media newsfeed echo chambers, as a lot of people have called them, and a certain kind of conspirational thinking, which I take to be something like the creation of, the acceptance of, and the maintenance of conspiracy theories. The basic gist of my talk is that there are these two different approaches, both of which I find really helpful in thinking about these phenomena. I'm going to focus on two basic questions. Are the phenomena intrinsically irrational? That is, if you form your beliefs primarily in a so-called echo chamber, or if you're engaging in conspirational thinking, is there something sort of all else equal irrational about what you're doing? That's one big question, and people have disagreed about some of that in the literature. And the second question, kind of more practical, is insofar as it's problematic, whether it's irrational or not, how do you remedy the problem? How do you solve the problem? And even those who don't take a position on the first question, whether it's rational or not, say that, our online echo chambers and our conspirational thinking has led to all kinds of bad things in society. So I take those to be two of the main questions. I'm going to present two kind of approaches of thinking about the phenomena and show that it matters which approach we take because they give us different verdicts on these two questions. The first approach is about motivations. And that is to say that the phenomena, and particularly social media echo chambers, are to be understood as facilitating a certain kind of cognitive bias, motivated reasoning. And the idea here is that there's nothing really new in kind about what we do when we're getting all of our information from our social media news feeds. There's nothing new about it, but it kind of puts these natural cognitive biases on steroids. And they can tend to get out of control. And the same thing happens with conspirational thinking. It's a well-known effect of your desires and fears on the way that you process the evidence. And it's a well-known cognitive bias, since the friends in your feed who are contributing to what you see are going to tend to have the same interests as you. You're just going to get those biases reinforced. You're going to process evidence in such a way that a, let's say, desired conclusion is more likely to be reached. The second approach to the phenomena is inspired, it's something that I've been thinking about lately, and it's inspired by the 17th century French thinker Blaise Pascal. He noticed that what we want to be true, what we love, what we fear, can sometimes affect what we see. This is not just a matter of how we process the evidence, it's a matter of what the available evidence is to us. Daniel Garber has called the effect of the state of our heart, as Pascal put it, on what we see and how we see things and what we see things as, he calls these mindsets. And so this is the mindset approach to the phenomena. On this way of thinking, echo chambers and conspirational thinking can work together and are sometimes reinforced by these social cult-like environments that I discuss in my talk, to put you in a particular mindset which affects the way that you see the world. And I try to give some concrete examples of how this works. And if this is right, then you should expect that two people in two different echo chambers, let's say, or in the grip of different kinds of conspirational thinking, will actually disagree about what the evidence even is. Things will just seem different to them. They see the world as different from each other. There's a certain incommensurability between their two sets of evidence. Okay, so now that I've presented these two approaches, how do we answer the two basic questions? Is it inherently irrational? Are the phenomena inherently irrational? And what are the available remedies for whatever problems they pose? Well, motivated reasoning is a cognitive bias, and insofar as the phenomena increase the amount of motivated reasoning you're in for, they increase your irrationality. So that's a very straightforward answer on the first approach. The second approach, there has been some work about how to counteract motivated reasoning, and I argue in the talk that it's kind of hopeless to do so in the kinds of cases we were talking about. It's a lot of cognitive load for someone to figure out, how biased am I? In what direction? How much should I correct for it? It's very difficult to get rid of this mental contamination once it's there. So those are the answers, pretty straightforward from the first approach. What about this second Pascalian approach of mindsets? Well, now it's actually controversial whether what's going on is inherently irrational. I mean, what your evidence is affected, no matter what you do, by your overall affective state. And if you respond to what your evidence is, it's a little hard to see what's irrational about that. And so there are controversies there in epistemology, which will have to be settled in order to settle this first question. So on the first question, they differ because it's controversial on one view and not on the other. On the second question of remedy, I think this is where it gets really interesting. If the Pascalian view is right, then in order to, if we want to put it like this, rid someone of a certain mindset that we think is damaging to society or damaging to themselves, the approach suggested here, I think, is to try to change what they love, try to change what they fear. It's not to overload their cognitive system with these tasks, like, really reconsider and reflect on this evidence and what it leads to. Many people won't do it. They don't want to do it. And the same forces that led them to arrive at their conclusion in the first place will lead them to resist that suggestion. But if you really work on what someone loves, what someone's allegiances are, then on this view, you actually change what their set of evidence is. The world will seem different. And so I do suggest that there are mixed signals from the studies out there, insofar as there are any, of this kind of approach. I look at some ideas from the deprogramming of cult members, and I try to apply that to this Pascalian approach. But the end result is, on the second question too, I think the second approach gives us a different direction to go in the first approach. The conclusion is, it matters. It matters how we understand evidence, how we understand what the evidence is. These deep epistemological questions really matter to these applied epistemological questions.